what to expect during an escrow period and how to make it a successful sale. Hi, my name is Roxanne Govari with Pemberley Realty, along with my partner, Santiago Guerin.
Hello, everyone. Hello. Looking forward to talking about yet another good topic and very important process in real estate. So, we have an expert here. So, looking forward to get some questions out of the way and talk about the whole process. So,
All right, so let's talk about it. Let's talk about the fact that that the way that we do our transactions here in California is different and is different from what takes place on the East Coast. On the East Coast, there is I don't believe that their process involves an escrow company. Their process involves an attorney and I'm not sure if there's only one attorney or if there's two attorneys, one for the seller, one for the buyer. But the process that we have here in California is an escrow company, which is basically a neutral party that their job is to get the deed from the seller, get the money from the buyer, and then do an exchange between the two, and make sure that the money goes from the buyer to the seller and the deed goes from the seller to the buyer. And in that process, I think the most interesting part about it with an escrow company is the buyer and seller never actually meet in person. Whereas in on the East Coast, you actually go and you have a closing, and everybody sits around the table, and then they pass on the deed from one person to the other to sign this off to the next person, and hey, you sign up that now you're taking possession and this is now your home. That's not the way that we do it. We do everything with escrow company as an intermediary, and then escrow company meets with the buyer separately. Escrow company meets with the seller separately, and then does everything via paperwork. Whereas buyer and seller never actually meet.
yeah, yeah,
And you've seen how this plays out, right?
yeah, yeah,
And what do you think?
yeah.
Because
I mean, that you kind of answered that. That was gonna be my first question. For people that might not know what escrow is, you kind of had a pretty good explanation on what exactly escrow is. So, I mean, it's also something that I kind of want to ask was like, what could cause delays in escrow? So, we talked about what exactly escrow does, but what could cause delays, if you're a seller or a buyer?
well, there's a number of things that could cause delays, right?
Yeah,
And that's one of those things that, for example, when we get a seller under contract, as far as we get ready to sell a house and we sign the contract to work together, the very first thing that we do is to order a preliminary title report, right?
yeah,
Or as we call it, a PR.
yeah,
And a title report basically is going to tell you all the encumbrances that are on the property, so that if there are any complications, if there's another lien on the place, if there's another owner that we didn't know about, or anything in between, the title report will show that, and then you can go ahead and resolve those issues before it delays the transaction. Remember, I always bring this one up, and this one is the story where years ago I got a duplex for sale, and I put it on the market. It was super, super attractive and went under contract fairly quickly. And then we went ahead and pulled the title report, and we found out that it wasn't actually a duplex, but it was a fourplex. And I had not pulled the title report before. The seller did not know that it was a fourplex. She thought that the two were duplex here and duplex there, and they were separate from each other.
yeah,
And as a result, we had to cancel contract because the buyer did not have the funds to buy the other half, and essentially the price just doubled, given that it wasn't a duplex but it was a fourplex.
Correct. Correct. Yeah. So
So complications like that. So you definitely want to pull title report, and then escrow is also the company that that keeps the initial deposit, right?
yeah.
Initial deposit being basically money that by a good faith deposit that the buyer puts in with escrow, just to show the seller that we're real, that we're committed, that we want to purchase your property, and
Yeah. I mean, basically, just the EMD. I was also going to ask you on that. I have it here on my list. Is it refundable? Some people might say like, I'm putting this good faith money in. I'm gonna lose. If something goes wrong and I want to back out, will I lose this money? Is that something that you know is
that's a
negotiable?
very good question.
Yeah.
And if you're in, I'm not sure if it's North Carolina or South Carolina, one of those states on the East Coast, once you put the money in, it's non-refundable. It goes directly to the seller, and you don't get it back. That is not how we operate here in California. If you are putting an initial deposit to purchase a property, you have a certain number of days that you are doing your due diligence. And within those number of days that you are doing your due diligence, you can cancel. You can cancel, and for what a variety of reasons. And if you do cancel, you get your full deposit back. Once you get to the end of your contingency period and you remove your contingencies in writing saying that I am satisfied with everything and now I'm removing my contingencies, past that period, then you have to, it's not, your deposit is not automatically released, but if you decide not to purchase the home after that period, then you have to release your deposit to the seller. But prior to the removal of contingencies, you can get your money back.
And I feel like that's something that a lot of people kind of, you know,
Don't
that are
realize.
looking to purchase are kind of scared of saying like, yeah, I have to put money down, and then what if something goes wrong and I lose that money, like I can't afford that. There's always that contingency period that you know gives you that backing. So I mean, and speaking of like EMDs and deposits, what is some of the fees that you can maybe expect from the escrow company when it comes to the transaction, to buying or selling? Is it usually something that the seller has to pay, that the buyer has to pay those fees? Is it negotiable? Um, you know, what can you tell everyone about that?
So, so normally what they charge is about, not sure exactly how they calculate it, but it's something, it's never more than 1% for all of those fees combined. So you have escrow and title, and then what we call junk fees.
Yeah,
All of those combined are not going to be more than 1% of the purchase price. And with that being said, escrow escrow fees usually are split between the buyer and the seller. Each part pays the equal amount for escrow to do what they do, because, again, they're supposed to be a neutral party,
yeah,
right? And their job is going to be basically putting out two buckets, one bucket that's holding all the money, one bucket that's holding the deed to the property, and then doing the exchange between these two items in the buckets, right?
yeah,
So it's even fair if they're charging both parties the same amount of money, because they're supposed to be treating both equally, and you can argue that treating both equally can come with charging both the same amount of money,
correct.
right?
Yeah, correct.
Um,
Yeah, I
so
mean,
that's as far as
yeah,
escrow fees. but
Yeah.
then also you have title fees, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
And we just had this situation where the title, this seller was looking and seeing that, oh, how come I'm the only one that's paying title fees? How come the buyer is not paying title fees? And and if the buyer is getting a loan, the buyer also has title fees that they pay for. So the seller is paying the seller is paying title fees because essentially title fees title is an insurance policy that you're purchasing.
Yeah.
You're purchasing an insurance policy to insure the title to the property.
Yeah.
And that insurance policy, so the seller pays for that insurance policy to cover the buyer, right? And then the buyer also pays an insurance policy in favor of the lender when they are getting a loan.
I see. I see.
So when you're paying cash, you can argue, okay, oh, there's only one title fee that you're paying for because at that point you're only insuring the buyer because you don't have a lender to pay for. But the majority of the transactions are there's a buyer and there's a lender, so that's why
Mhm.
the seller pays one side and the buyer pays the other
Is
side.
the
But
other.
that normally does not go on the contract that the buyer is also paying an insurance policy towards in favor of the lender. That usually goes on the contract between the buyer and their loan provider.
Okay. Okay. And what about like, you know, speaking of with the, working with the loan officer and, with escrow, what are some documents that are signed during this escrow process? Like, are they documents that could be signed virtually? Can they be done? Do they have to be in person? Like how, you know?
Good question. So normally some escrow companies use the purchase contract that the real estate agents negotiate. Some escrow companies use that real estate contract as their escrow instructions because escrow needs to have instructions as to how to go about to basically make this transfer between money and deed and make that transfer. And some escrows use the contract as their escrow instructions. Some escrows use the contract and then they draft their own contract, and that becomes their escrow instructions.
Yeah.
So either way, you have escrow instructions, and they can be signed electronically or they can be signed in person.
Okay.
And then escrow also has the task of preparing a new deed to the property, which is essentially it's same as how you have a title to your car.
Yeah.
Well, the deed the deed of trust is basically replaces. Well, it doesn't replace the title, but it's in place of the title when you have a loan on the house. So when you have a loan on the house, then you have a deed of trust, which basically says, okay, you are the new owner to this property, as long as you pay what you owe to the lender. Once you pay that all of that off, then they will give you the title. Very
Yeah.
similar to what you do when you're buying a car,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Same
Mhm.
same kind of process.
Yeah.
So and escrow's job is to prepare that deed, and that deed needs to be signed and notarized by the seller, to basically say, okay, I'm the seller, I'm giving up my rights to this deed, or instrument that proves that I'm the owner. I'm giving that up in favor of the buyer, as long as the buyer gives me the money that I'm
Yeah.
looking for.
Yeah.
So it's escrow's job to prepare that, and that is one document that cannot be signed electronically.
Yeah.
It has to be signed in front of a notary, And then you probably will ask me next, what if the seller is not local?
Yeah.
Well, if the seller is not local, then you can have a notary that's going to go to the seller wherever they are physically and have them sign that there, as long as you are within the United States.
Yeah.
If you're outside of the United States, you can still do that.
Hmm.
And fortunately, with all the technology that we have, thanks to being able to see each other in person electronically, you're actually able to sign the deed via a virtual notary, and that works, and you can get it done. So it's still, I guess you could say, it's a signing electronically. It's not just the same as when you would normally sign
Yeah.
electronically. There's an extra layer to it.
Yeah. 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 I mean, it's a very long process, and a lot of stuff that you have to do, and also something what we want to talk about, like some cases that we've had before with escrow officers, and how we like to work with them. What can you expect from an escrow officer? What are you looking for from an escrow officer? Like, how often should they reach out to you, or like give you updates? What do you expect, and what do you like about certain escrow
Well,
officers?
there's so much more that an escrow officer does, right? For example, if you have a loan, your escrow officer reaches out to your lender, find out how much your loan is, how much is your payoff amount, because you may say, okay, well, I know that I have $500,000 in loan, but once you start paying off that amount, right, then the lender wants not only their money but all the interest that they were promised, and it usually is not just a straight 500,000; it's a little bit more. So escrow is in charge of basically communicating with the lender, finding out exactly how much they're owed, and then making sure that the lender gets that money paid to them, so that once escrow closes, they're not owed any more money, and they don't come after you, the seller, for the remainder of the money. So there's a lot of communication that needs to happen there, and a lot of coordination that needs to happen. Then you have taxes, you have insurance. The escrow company also has to make sure that taxes and insurance are paid up to when the escrow closes. You may have a condo, and the condo may have an HOA. The escrow company must also make sure that HOAs are paid and there's no delinquent fees, owed to the HOA. By the time you close escrow, then everybody that would be accredited to the seller, they need to have been paid and been
Yeah.
satisfied, right? Um, let's see what else are some of the things that escrows need to do, that is that could be complicated. For example, you have an HOA. If you have an HOA, the lender wants to have access to HOA documents. The lender would want to see. Okay, let me look at the reserves on the condo complex. Let me see how much money they have. Are they solvent? Let me see how much money they're owed. Let me see if there's any special assessments coming up that's going to affect the pocket of the buyer buying into the property. So it's escrow's job also to order HOA documentation and get that to the buyer and to the lender to review all of that. So yeah, there is
Yeah. Definitely a lot of stuff that they do. So
people on the outside think that escrow's job is simple, but there's a lot of attention to details need to happen, a lot of communication that needs to happen to connect both sides together, and make sure that there's a
yeah,
smooth transition between the two.
correct. Yeah. I mean, and kind of to wrap up, what would you advise those first time, home buyers or first time sellers that are going to go through escrow? Like, what's some advice you would give them?
I would say the most important part is you're going to get an estimated settlement statement, which basically lines up all the costs that you're going to incur. The buyer gets one, and the seller gets one. And paying attention to that settlement statement and making sure that all the numbers on that settlement statement make sense to you, and there's no charges that are unknown to you. That would be the biggest thing to pay attention to when you're working with an escrow company.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as your escrow company is communicative, and then you're good to go. But it is also important to know that what escrow companies do is not the same as what us agents do. We are in charge of negotiating the transaction, negotiating between the buyer and the seller, and also to make sure that the nuances in the transaction are done smoothly. Escrow's job is strictly to deal with the transfer of money and transfer of title. Everything else, anything that has to do with negotiations between the two parties, is outside of the authority and outside of the scope of work that an escrow company takes care of.
Correct. Yeah.
All right. Anything else that you can add to the mix?
Yeah, I mean, just being in escrow, when you finally accept an offer or, you're under contract, it can be a little stressful for some people, but,
Yeah,
that's why we're here for to, make sure that, they don't have to worry about, any of those things that are, coming
absolutely,
up and having to deal with. So it's always good to have, a good team. So,
absolutely.
yeah.
And I am very lucky that we have a great team, right?
Yep. Correct. Correct.
So, on that note, let's ask our audience that if they are watching us on YouTube, to please give us thumbs up and subscribe to our channel, so as we're posting these videos, they are able to get notified and are able to find our newest videos. And on that note, if you are trying to get in touch with us, there is my phone number, and there is Santi's phone number,
There you go.
and there is our website if you guys want to check us out and see what we're up to. And we also have our email address that you can send us an email to. And if you're looking us up on Facebook or see us on Facebook, there's our Facebook name. And if you're on Instagram, there's our Instagram handle, and we would really appreciate if you give us a follow. And if you are thinking of buying or selling, or if you have any real estate questions anywhere in the country or anywhere in the world, we would love to be your go-to realtors. So give us a chat, and let us know how we can help. And thank you so much for watching.
Yep. Thank you, everyone. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed, learned something new today, and looking forward to seeing you guys in the next video.
See you later.